Okay, as I said earlier, we will set up our normals of our materials, and then I will basically make the water surfaces that we have to be customizable, so we could have smaller ripples or bigger ripples, and also the speed of the waves and the ripples on the surface of our water customizable, so you could create instances of this material. Now let's see, and let's set up our textures or our normals for the water. Now, if you look at the contents that you have in the chapter 2 material packages from volume 2 of the book, you have two water normal textures that you could set up and use for your for the normals of your water. So let's set these up, which basically these things dictate the length of the ripples on the surface of your water. Okay, so let's click on one of the textures and then go to your materials and bring a texture sample, and then go back to your content browser, click on the other texture normal, and select on it. So now we have two texture samples, one with each of the normals that we have. Now bring to add, actually one add component here, and then add one of the texture samples RGB with the alpha value of the other texture sample. Now this will give you basically the addition of the normals for one of your for the ripples on the surface of your object. And if you use this component and multiply it with your refraction multiplier that you had, and add the multiplier to the distortion section of your material, and then right click and play your materials, you will see now the material is kind of distorted. Let me go one more time close to this, and so you see that your material is distorted a little bit, as you see from here, if you view your material from the side. Now if we apply the output of the normal combination that we created here to the normal section of your material and apply the changes, now your material also will be basically the normal map, as you see, will dictate how the surface of your material is. It's also ripply. Okay, so here's how it actually looks like. So the ripples on the surface are applied from the combination of your normal maps, and as you see, the distortion basically makes the look of the objects underneath the surface distorted a little bit. Okay, now the final step in creating this material look realistic is to go ahead and apply the combination of the speed and the timing of your materials, so the ripples will basically become animated on the surface of your objects. Now to do that, I need two parameters, one for the speed of the ripples and one for the tiling of my material. So bring two constant parameters or two scalar parameters, and then call one of these scalar parameters UV tiling, and let's make it 16, its values, and let's call the other one the speed or ripple speed. Okay, and I'll make that 0.25 units. Then right click from the utilities, I'll bring a time and then multiply the time to the ripple speed, and then right click and bring a texture coordinate from the coordinates section, and then multiply your texture coordinate with the UV tilings. The reason that I'm doing this is this. Because my texture coordinates and my time are multiplied by two parameters, and these parameters have values, later on from the content browser, I can right-click on the material and create an instance, and then go and change these parameters. And this way I can create materials with ripples that are moving faster or slower, or materials whose ripples are bigger or smaller. Okay. Next, I need to basically create a the ripples that I have here, which will have their own speeds and their own UV tilings to move around. And as you've seen earlier, you can right-click and then from coordinates bring in a panner, and the panner basically with the combination of the time and the UV tilings would move the coordinates of another texture. And then we apply the coordinates of the panner to the UV tiling and time to the ripple speed multipliers. Okay, and then go to your content browser, and then there's a cloud colored texture here. That's basically a texture that you can manipulate and move it back and forth and bring a texture sample off of this cloud. And then if you apply your panner here and change the panner coordinates values, say for example to move along the x direction for minus 0.2 units, then it would move your texture coordinate along the x direction with 0.4 point units. Okay, and then bring in another panner. So go to texture coordinates and bring in another panner, and again get the time and the coordinates applied to it, and now make it change along the x direction for 0.3 units. And so this will move your texture coordinate along the x direction for 3 units. And next, right click from the utilities, bring a component mask and get the input of the component mask from the RGB and check the green and red values for the component mask. And then add its values to your second panner. So what we have here is that we have two panners. One moves along the x direction and one moves along the y direction. We get the time and the texture coordinates from the texture coordinate and the timing that we created. We apply the first panner to UV coordinate of a colored cloud texture that moves it around in one direction. Get the red and green components of it, basically a two-dimensional matrix, and add it to the second panner. And then we can use this value as the input of one of our texture samples. Okay, now if you apply this, you will see and play the level, you will notice that now the water surface is moving. Okay, now I will create a copy of these texture coordinate panners that I created by selecting all of them and duplicating them, and then I'll go to the panners and make their X and Y values differently. The coordinates come from texture coordinate samples that we created, and the times come from the ripple speed and time multiplication expressions. and then add these coordinates to the second UVs and save your material. And when you play, now you'll see that your material looks more complicated. Now, if you go and open your view here and change the texture coordinate sample from tiling that was 16, make the tiling to 0.25, your texture, the ripples would become larger, as you see here. Okay? And of course, you can make the ripples move faster. Say if there was faster wind speed. So if you multiply this by 2, the ripples become faster. And if you play the game, the level, you will see that the ripples are now moving a lot faster. So it's like the water looks more agitated. Or you can change the speed parameter to 0.5. And the water moves slower. If you change the tiling parameters, let's say if you increase it to 1, you see the ripples are smaller here. And as you see, the refraction that comes from the normal movement, normal values basically makes the objects behind the water surface look refracted. Okay. Now if we increase this tiling to say 2, then you'll notice that the ripples are much smaller now. Okay. Now another parameter that we have here is the parameter that dictates the color of your water. So if you change this liquid color parameter to a different color, you double click and change it to say a greenish or a reddish color, as you see here, you will be able to create a different color for your water surface. Okay. If you change the reflection strength from 1 to 0.25, you will be able to make your water less reflective, basically. Okay, so it doesn't reflect as much as if your water was polluted. If you increase your reflection power, your water becomes more reflective. Okay, let's apply this watercolor now. Alright. So, as you see, I applied a plane basically here, and that plane, when I apply the water surface to it, it looks pretty. It looks like there's water on it, but when I right click, when I use weapons on top of it, it doesn't quite react as if it was a water surface. Now to do that, let's delete this plane, go to the content browser and choose the water material that you created, save it, and then from the content browser go to actor classes, click on fluids, and then click on fluid surface actor. Minimize your content browser and then right click and add the fluid surface actor to your view. And then you can scale down this fluid surface actor to scale at the size of the objects that you had and build your geometry. Now if you play the level, and now you see that your fluid surface acts as if it was fluid. And now click on your fluid surface, go to your content browser, go to the content browser, click on the water surface, minimize it, right click on the fluid surface, and apply, or no, actually click on your water surface, your fluid surface, press F4, and then from the fluid material, apply the fluid material, water fluid material to it. Close and play your level. And as you see here, now you have a fluid surface that moves around, and when you hit it with objects, it reacts.